I've had a request to explain exactly the moment that I knew I was in love with literature and books, which might sound a bit obnoxious, but what I want to show you is that love of literature is actually love of so many other things, all the best parts of humanity. Books are containers of consciousness. They have the author's consciousness, whoever wrote it, whatever they experienced, whatever they saw, it's intertwined in the pages of that book that can last centuries. The magic of being able to sit down and read a book, it lies in its capacity to create a dialogue between now and then, this person reading and that person writing. When you read particularly one author for a long period of time, say somebody that's read and written a lot, like Voltaire. Okay, Voltaire would be a good example. He wrote thousands of essays, pamphlets, creative pieces, and you almost fall into his psyche when you read him, and you begin to see the world through his eyes, not just yours, and you begin to understand experiences and events in different ways that you would have otherwise never even conceptualized, not just because of your context and your time period, but also because you get another fragment of reality in the perspective of some other person that was most likely much more intelligent than you. And that is a great privilege, to be able to fall into that consciousness. And I realized this inadvertently, thankfully, from Oscar Wilde when I was 9. Now you might think, Charlotte, you were 9. There's no way you understood books at 9. And I agree. It was very early in the 2000s, so Google was not yet on anyone's phone, and indeed I didn't have a phone at that age. So I had a dictionary, and I would sit with my dictionary on my bed, and I would find almost every word on that first front page of Picture of Dorian Gray. Slightly questionable choice regarding plot, I understand, but there's a section of Picture of Dorian Gray, and I have an excellent copy here which has Ryan Gosling on the front. Who doesn't love that? In that first chapter, there's a description of a garden, and 9-year-old Charlotte, she opened that book in a shop called Sappho's in Glebe, Sydney. Now, this bookshop is not like normal bookshops. It doesn't look organized from the outside. It's beautifully disorganized, like the chaotic genius of all the writers that lived in there, in that bookshop. Even though there is some sort of order to it, in the sense that you have fiction and non-fiction and secondhand and firsthand and so on, there's so much beauty in the stacking of books upon books in this shop that has almost a deceptive amount of structure. For example, because I was quite small, I walked into that bookshop, and we were originally going because it had a cafe at the back, and so we were going to have lunch with somebody. I forget now who it was. God bless them for introducing us to that shop. And I remember seeing this cover on the bottom row, and it had such a beautiful spine. It had gold writing on the spine, and the book was green, like a dark green, an Irish green, we could say, much like Wilde himself. And I picked up the book and I opened the first page, and I have this distinct memory of reading that first page and the garden actually appearing before me. I could see this other reality written on a page, and the magic of a writer being able to create something from nothing created this ontological shock within me, wherein I could not seem to put that book down. Even though I thankfully misunderstood the plot at 9 and misunderstood half of the words despite my dictionary, that moment sitting at the bottom of Sappho's bookshop and seeing a garden and a painter creating this artwork. It was very, now that I look back at it, very metafictional. You have a young girl who wants to be a writer, well, when she's older will want to be a writer, reading about an artist painting, and from both the artist and the writer creating a vision of something that was not actually there. It was complete wizardry to me. And there was an adult in the vicinity on this lunch table, and I had my little book with me. And they said, "Oh, Charlotte, you won't be able to read that. Put the book back." And I quite remember vehemently begging for this book. At which point, you know, when you're a child and you can annoy adults enough to kind of get you to do something, it's just a book. Thankfully, they didn't know what the book was about. Otherwise, perhaps they would have not bought it for me. But I could distinctly recall going to the front counter and with a big smile on my face saying, "This book, please." And the owner smiled. And I think it was originally something like $20. But it was secondhand and it was a bit broken around the edges, and he said, "For you, love," very strong Australian accent, "for you, love, you can have it for $5. I left the shop with incredible ecstasy, and I never stopped loving the magic of seeing something that wasn't there, of creating something that didn't exist. I thought it was otherworldly, and it is. Now that I'm older, it is otherworldly to be able to fashion something out of thin air and make a reality out of it. We are all writers at the end of the day. When we think and talk about our past, we're writing our past. We're constantly writing and rewriting what happened to us, where we're going, what we're doing right now. We're all writers. And that's why I think that art of reading and writing, so quickly taken over by AI and other things, we're losing the magic of what it means to be human, which is to create something out of nothing. That's something that nobody else can really do. Perhaps there are many an alien laughing at me right now, and that's okay, they may laugh. But to be able to see something that doesn't exist yet, and then create words or paintings or any form of music, really, because that's sounds as well, sounds that don't exist yet, that are written on the page, and then that incites the musician to follow along with the composer. The composer's hearing of things that aren't quite there yet, and they create a visual image. Any art, any form of art, that's what makes us human. And I fear very much that we're going to lose that skill, that humanity within us that comes from writing and reading and music and dancing and doing things from nothing, because we don't value it anymore. It's not AI's fault. It's that we don't actually value that anymore. We don't value writing. We think it's some chore. We don't value art. We just want to be entertained. We want a little dopamine push. We don't want thoughtful compositions of music. We want something that's surround sound and engaging, because we've lost the capacity to listen to each other, to listen to stories in the form of art. And I know perhaps my picture of Dorian Gray was a slight anomaly at that age, but I would argue any person, anywhere in the whole world, can fall in love with writing. They just need to find the right author. And that author might be them. Perhaps it is through the frustrating act of writing, of trying to create sentences that function as a symbolic representation of your being, of your experiences, of things that you want to experience. perhaps things that you don't want to experience and you're trying to rewrite them. That frustration that once you overcome that moment of, oh God, I don't want to do this. And instead of getting AI to do it, you keep pushing through. You keep reading people who you admire and you think, oh, okay, they used a metaphor to explain that thing, or they used this color palette to express this thing. Okay, well, maybe I'll do that and then I'll do my own take on it. And in that continuing of a tradition, of that human tradition to create something from nothing, you become happier. You become more satisfied because you've actually had the opportunity to reflect, to think, to be. And there's nothing more satisfying than finding an author write something in a way that makes you feel as though you are understood. As Orwell said, and I'm going to paraphrase, perhaps we do not want to be loved, we just want to be understood. Art makes us feel understood just as we are, bare, vulnerable, naked to our ideas. And so all of these realizations come with engaging in discourses of books, of stories. And for that reason, I implore you all to find your version of Sappho's Bookshop, whatever that is. That could just be, researching on the internet and then falling absolutely in love with the first page of Thomas Carlyle. Maybe you're a philosopher and you love Thomas Carlyle, or perhaps you've always felt as though your tangential mind is too crazy and insane to be understood, but then you open The Waves by Virginia Woolf and all of a sudden you are not the only person that not only saw those things but felt those things. You are not so alone anymore. Perhaps that trope of the book nerd being a bit lonely or isolated, yet happy in such isolation, comes from finding incredible companionship in writers, in other creators of art, which sounds perhaps a little bit pathetic, but I don't care, because it's the truth. I've had many a conversation with Voltaire. I've had many a conversation with Seneca and Epictetus. Of course, I don't think they would want to listen to my opinion, but I certainly want to listen to theirs. And in reading them, I fall into that consciousness of theirs and I revel in it. Perhaps that's another lesson to learn as well. Now that I think of it, a lesson I must learn is that if we read and write things we don't agree with, that is of course important to the extent that we need to understand other people's opinion and perspectives that we mightn't accord with. And we need to understand why they think those things. And that's very important because it leads to respect. However, if you begin to write too much like others or too much in ways that do not accord with your own being, then all of a sudden you're going to create a reality you don't want anymore. You don't want that life of someone else. You want your own life. And that can only be done when you live completely and utterly in the spirit of your own being. You can work in corporate and work in the spirit of your own being. I've actually met quite a few people that thrive in those circumstances, and it is a complete expression of their psyche and their experiences, and that is absolutely fine. They love writing slide decks because they do genuinely believe in what they're writing, and that's wonderful. That's why they thrive. But I think many of us do not thrive in those circumstances. In fact, if you clicked on this link, you probably don't thrive in that circumstance because it does not accord in any way with your consciousness or the consciousness you wish to belong to. And for that reason, I think it's so important when you begin your reading journey and your writing journey that you initiate and start your experiences in writers that do actually express either experiences you understand or experiences that you want to understand. Once you're good at reading and once you're good at writing, then you can start reading others without falling into consciousnesses all the time. You can critically think. You can go, oh, okay, well, I agree with this bit on Spinoza, or I don't agree with this section in Spinoza because I feel fortified in my own being. But until you are fortified in your own being, read people that you feel express exactly how you are. Or close to, because probably no one else can do that except for you, but perhaps they get close. Keats, for example. When I was 12, we were made to watch Bright Star by Jane Campion in school. I loved the movie. And so naturally, I picked up the book in the library, and I picked up Endymion, of all things. For anybody who knows, Endymion's a very, very long poem, narrative poem, and once again I fell in love. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness. That very famous line, I think it actually saved me multiple times. Because I grew up in the age of social media, I very quickly fell into, oh, am I pretty enough? Am I thin enough? Is my image good enough? Good enough for what should be the question, but good enough. And thankfully, Keats, in that one individual line, whenever I felt like I looked a bit chubby or a bit too thin or a bit too fat in one photo or another, you know how it is, I would just recite that phrase to myself. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness. It saved me. And I think that's the thing, is that people assume, book nerds or academics to have a certain dark milieu, to think, oh yes, well, I'm very posh because I understand all these concepts and I'm so clever. Let me talk about Meditations by Marcus Aurelius for thousands and thousands of times. Not that there's anything wrong with Marcus Aurelius, he was a very impressive man. However, really what a good and authentic book nerd is, or indeed perhaps a good nerd in general, if you are seeking to be a nerd, that is that you actually fall in love with the art to the extent that you cannot live without it. For example, I don't actually enjoy writing. I just can't not write. If I don't write, I go mildly crazy. I have to write, but I don't really want to write. And sometimes I don't really want to read. I want to be lazy and watch Star Trek Next Generation on my couch, which actually is a piece of artwork, but that's a side note. But I have to read. If I don't read, I can't function. I can't actually navigate the world. And I think that's the thing, is that in life, when you find that thing that saves you from, in my case, social judgment when I was a teenage girl, or saves you from being bullied at work. Perhaps you read Machiavelli's The Prince or 48 Laws of Power, and then that helps you navigate the world in a different way. When you find those things, that's what you're supposed to do in life. You're not supposed to diverge into realms and consciousnesses that do not accord with your own creature, with your own being. And for that reason, I believe we all need an experience of Sappho's Bookshop with whatever artwork or with whatever thing it is that we need to do on this planet individually. And I'd love to hear, actually, if you chance upon this video and you get to the 20 minutes that we're now in, if you get to that point, please let me know what your Sappho's Bookshop experience was, because I think we all need that. I think we all need a lot more stories of Not just ways of coping, but ways of actually being happy and experiencing life. All thanks to the generosity of others. The generosity of the bookshop owner, the generosity of Oscar Wilde for writing, the generosity of John Keats for, despite dying at 25, was somehow able to create an entire genre of literature. Well, okay. If you're an academic, don't nail me to the wall. I know he wasn't the only romantic, but he certainly created a lot of the tropes, like negative capability and so on. I think that's perhaps enough now for this video, but you get the idea. Find your Sappho's bookshop and you'll find the key to life.